And welcome back to the OHIO podcast, everybody. I am your host, Buckeye Boggs, aka the Podfather. That handsome gentleman to my left, that's the Wildman, Chris Wilds, and you are you. And we're thankful that you decided to join us for a Can Ohio State become the next dynasty in college football edition of the OHIO podcast? Do us a big favor, everybody, and smash that like button. It absolutely helps us in the old YouTube algorithm. You know what else helps us? Making sure you're subscribed. Hit that subscription if you're not subscribed to the channel already. It's absolutely free, costs you nothing. And finally, if anything during this video strikes your fancy, put a little comment down in the comment section below. That too helps that pesky algorithm as we continue to try to grow this community known as the OHIO podcast. Chris, we had a great question during our live show Sunday night that I starred, and I promised that it would receive its own video. That is what this is. The question came from one Ryan Day's championship beard. I'm not sure why the beard didn't just ask the rest of the face to answer for it, but it decided to come to you and I and ask us, and so we'll answer the beard the best we know how to do. This question is, can we be the next Alabama winning at that clip? I'm asking for real. I don't really recall what we were actually talking about at that moment when the question came out about winning at that clip. I think 10-2 during the regular season maybe is what we were talking about, maybe. Can we become the next dynasty if that's the case? So let's start there. Let's dive into the question and start there. First question: was Ohio State considered a dynasty at any point during the Woody Hayes era?
You,
Oh, I just started off with a doozy, didn't I?
you know,
Well, before we answer that,
I don't, I
maybe the
don't.
fair question is to actually say what constitutes a dynasty. Maybe that's the fair question. Like
Okay, now
what?
see, for me, Eric, I think it's going to be different in the Woody Hayes era versus the Nick Saban era versus the Ryan Day era. Because I think if you go back to the Woody Hayes era, because it was strictly a AP poll voted champion, I mean, you first of all, it was a requirement to beat your rival, required, because you couldn't even be considered for the championship if you didn't beat your rival.
True.
It was required that you win your bowl game, which obviously that's still a requirement because if you don't win your bowl games, you're not going to be number one at the end of the season. Um, so I think that in Woody Hayes there, it was probably more difficult, I think, to be considered a dynasty at the time. Because I think if you look at it in the Nick Saban era, it started to transition, and now in the Ryan Day era of NFL Light, you can be a champion without that prerequisite of winning your rivalry game. You can be a champion, we've seen it now, without that prerequisite of even being your conference champion. So, do you have to be a conference champion and beat your rival and win the national championship to be considered a dynasty? Do you have to be dominant over not only your league, but every other league to be considered a dynasty? I mean, I think in Woody Hayes' era, because there was so few criteria, there were so few opportunities, I should say, it was more difficult to have a dynasty in the Woody Hayes era than it is now.
I would disagree. I'd say it was easier then than it is now.
Why?
Less games.
There is less games,
You
but at the
didn't
same
have
time,
you didn't
less,
have an actual postseason that was 14 playoff or now 12-team playoff.
but more games equals more opportunity.
You literally
Because if you didn't, the fewer games meant there was no opportunity to get into a playoff at 10-2.
Yeah, you just had to run the Big Ten and then beat a Pac-12 champion.
That's true,
I mean,
but
easier
at the
said than
same,
done, but
yeah,
you didn't have to worry about the SEC necessarily.
but you had to win every game for all intents and purposes.
No, you didn't. No,
I
you
mean,
didn't.
you
Woody
might be able
Hayes
to
won
slip up
5
in
national
one
championships, and 3 of them had, um, let's see,
a
uh,
loss.
1957 they were 9-1. 1961 they were 8-0-1. They didn't even play 10 games, and they were the
Yeah.
national champion. In 1970 they were 9-1. So 3 out of his 5 national championships they actually had
How many
a
times did
loss
they have
or a
two
tie.
losses? How many times did they have two losses?
None,
Because you couldn't.
but you didn't have to go undefeated.
No, but you had, for all intents and purposes, to at least win your conference,
Yes.
win your win
You
your
had to
bowl
win
game.
your conference in order to make it to the Rose Bowl, and then you had to beat the
Correct.
Pac-12 champion, and then you also needed to need to be better than the Big Eight or the SEC champion.
Exactly. But by those standards, Ohio State would have even played for the title this year.
True,
By
but
that standard, I mean, if and I will say this: if you look at Nick Saban's championships, and he actually spanned the era from the BCS to the playoff era. Um, he had a championship during that BCS era when he was with LSU. Uh, in fact, he had one actually had one of his Alabama titles came during the BCS era, and then he had the playoff championships under the 14 playoff, which you know, again, if you look at the 14 playoff era, there was times where, at least once I know of, where he did not win his conference, but was able to go on and win the national title. He
right,
lost in his championship game.
yeah.
Again, had this been back in the Woody Hayes era, not an option. You don't win that championship game, you don't play for a title. It was that
Uh,
simple.
okay, all right. I will concede the argument here, although I disagree with you. But I will concede the argument to you here for the sake of just trying to
Move
get
on.
to the what? Because you
Just for the sake
won.
of moving on. No,
Yes,
for the sake of moving on.
yes, yeah. Let's look at Alabama because the question was about Alabama, and I think Ryan
Yes.
Day's beard here is saying Alabama was a dynasty. So if Alabama is our definition of a dynasty, what does that mean in terms of how many natties and how many years? Answer that question for me.
Well, let's see. Nick Saban was at Alabama from 2007 to 2023. That covered a span of 16 years, and he had 6 national titles during that reign.
Okay, so how
That
many
means he's
national?
averaging a national title every 2.25 seasons.
Okay, so let's just say you need to win one every 3 years or two every five,
Two every five.
and that constitutes a dynasty. So
Yeah.
Georgia's a dynasty.
A brief lived dynasty at the moment.
Okay.
But
Uh,
here's the
I
thing
wouldn't
though.
call
Isn't
Georgia a
this,
dynasty yet.
I
Like
can't. I
let's
can't. They
say
don't have that history.
let's say why does what do you mean
I,
by history?
I if you look, I think part of being a dynasty is the mystique around the program. I don't think Georgia has a mystique around the program the way that an Ohio State does, the way that an Alabama does. Hell, even the way a scum sucking pigs up north have.
So if let's pick Clemson because Clemson didn't have the mystique. If Clemson would have
Yeah,
won a third national championship when they were getting into national championships and winning.
and arguments to be made.
Okay, so is Georgia one away from having a dynasty?
Well, let's see. They won their last one, what, 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm. They won two in
And
two years.
they were back to back.
And so if they were to, let's say they win the one in 2025, that's 3 and 5 years.
I think
That's
what
got to
kind
be a
of
dynasty, right?
you would think, but I don't know because I think when I think dynasty, I think over a longer period of time than just 5 years.
Okay, so what's the time frame?
I don't know. I
10?
mean, a decade maybe.
Okay, 10 years. All right.
So if you have, I would say this would be my take. If you have 3 to 4 titles in 10 years, you're arguably a dynasty.
Okay, so if you have 3 titles in 10 years, but another team has 4 in 10 years, are you both a dynasty? Or is
I would
the
say
one,
you look at the body of work and which one's been more consistent at the
well,
top of the
what if the
game.
team that's won 4 national titles only had 4 winning seasons, but they won those national titles in those 4 years and they weren't winning
Well,
seasons,
exactly. That's what I'm saying. You look at the consistency. You look at the
but they
whole of
have
the.
4 national titles. So how could
Okay.
you argue against that when the other one has 3? You say the one with 3 is a dynasty, but the one with 4 is not.
Okay. Let's say what you're talking about is they've only got 4 winning seasons, so their winning percentage is say like 68%,
Okay?
but the other team's winning percentage over 10 years
80.
is 85%.
Sure.
If they're 85% winning 85% of the games over a decade period, and they've got 3 national titles, they damn well should be considered a dynasty.
But the other team's got 4. They got one more.
Okay, but they're only winning 60% of their games.
Who cares? I got 4 national titles. You got 3.
But you're only winning 60% of your games. To me,
I don't care. It's all about national
dominant
titles.
enough. That's not dominant enough to be a dynasty.
If dominance, if you think when
It's
you say
consistency as much as anything, Eric.
so, which Nick Saban was.
And
Okay,
he
let's
was.
see.
If you look at Nick Saban's run at Alabama,
See, that's
just
the
that.
problem. That's the problem with this question. You can't say you're in the midst of a dynasty until you look back. Dynasty is a rear
Correct.
dynasty is a rear view mirror
It
word.
is. It is. You're absolutely right. But just for argument's sake, Nick Saban at Alabama was 206 with 206 wins in 235 games. That's an
Yeah,
87.8 winning percentage.
because the SEC is soft.
Well, they
Yeah,
are
I said
now.
it. I said it.
They are
Come
now,
at
but
me,
you know what?
SEC.
You know what? They are now, but you would be hard pressed as
The
much as I
SEC
hate the
was
SEC.
the argument that the SEC top to bottom was the best conference is
Top
such
to
a
bottom, no.
they're not.
They're top tier just like the Big Ten.
They
They're
were
top
so
heavy.
top heavy. They were so top heavy. Now was
You
there
have
one?
3 to 4 teams every year that are very, very good, and
I would
one that
I
is
will
dominant.
I will concede this argument to the SEC, Chris. If the Big Ten had 3 really good top end teams, the SEC had 4. You had one more top end team than the Big Ten did. But I would make the argument that the middle level of the Big Ten teams
Was
were
better.
much better than the SEC. And I also say this: the bottom level of the Big Ten was worse than the SEC. The bottom level of the Big Ten's
Yes,
bad. Like
it's really
it's
bad.
always been bad, whether it would be Indiana or
It's
now
MAC
Purdue
type
or
of bad.
Yes, it's lose to the MAC. However, that happened in the SEC this year too.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Um, so so if 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 we're gonna agree that the word dynasty is a rear view mirror
It definitely is.
word, then that means I don't think we can call whatever era we are in the Ryan Day era. We cannot call it a dynasty until what? He retires, he leaves, or he
Um,
wins
I think
what?
I think if he establishes now, if we look at him right now, in 6 seasons,
Yep.
he has an 87.5% winning percentage.
Which is unbelievable.
Phenomenal.
It's Newt Rockney level. Like,
And you think about this, he's 87.5% winning percentage, and it'll probably go up when 3 wins are vacated from another team. But we're going to just leave that off to the side, even if it
we
doesn't happen.
disagree, but go for it.
Um, he is now 6-4 in bowl games with the run that he made this season. He is now what? Is it 6-5 versus top 5 teams now? Or
Yeah, he's got a winning record.
he,
7-6. something like that.
7-6.
Six
7-6.
6-5 against top five. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yes.
I think you're right.
But he's got a winning record now versus top 5 teams, and he has a championship. Now, if he gets another championship, and you're talking 2 championships in 10 years, for instance, and he maintains this, whispers start getting into the discussion.
7-6.
7-6. So if he wins a 3rd championship or a 4th championship inside that same 16-year window and manages to elevate his winning percentage up above Nick Saban or up to equal with Nick Saban, then there is a very legitimate argue, given that I will say now with the 12-team playoff, it is, I don't want to say it's more difficult necessarily than a 14
Because
playoff.
yeah, you do. But if
No,
you do it,
I
it
really
reneges your
don't. I
argument
really
about Buddy
don't because
Hayes.
I think no. Here's the thing. I think the 14 playoff typically had the best 4 teams in it,
False.
whereas the 12-team playoff.
False.
Okay, the 14 playoff outside of the Florida State situation had the most deserving teams in it every year.
The top 4 playoff had the 4 best regular season teams in it,
Correct.
not the 4
Correct.
best.
Okay, I'll agree with that.
All right.
But the
Now,
12-team
okay.
playoff has that wild card component
Yes.
where things can sneak up on you.
Yeah.
So,
it's more NFL like.
it is.
Now let's look at it from this perspective here. I am, and I've played devil's advocate with you a lot here for the sake of the fact that I want to come to a firm conclusion. Does Ohio State have the best chance of becoming a dynasty in this new era? Or do you believe we are looking at a new era in which the word dynasty has to be changed because you're just not going to see runs of dominance like we saw in the Nick Saban era? And then I have one more question after you answer
Well,
that.
as we move to an NFL light type model, as we've talked, an argument can be made for exactly what you said. We may have to redefine dynasty or acknowledge that dynasties are no longer going to exist to that potential. Because if you look, you can very much liken Nick Saban's run to Belichick and Brady's run in the NFL. Now you look and you've got the Patrick Mahomes era in the NFL, but at the same time, it's not quite as dominant as we just saw this past Sunday. So I think maybe as we look and as both the college and pro game are progressing, I don't know that we're going to see that Brady New England dynasty or that Saban Alabama dominance like we've seen in the past, because the game is just it's changing.
All right.
I don't know that we're ever going to see another dominant team that was as dominant as Alabama on the field.
Last question. Should the Nick Saban era dynasty have an asterisk placed to it because during that era the SEC was doing illegal NIL and everybody knows it now?
Well, here's my take on it.
Okay.
You know how I feel about anything like this. If it was illegal at the time, you should be punished.
They're never going back and doing that retroactively.
Well, I agree, but adding an asterisk might be just punishment enough. Just to acknowledge it, because you're right. The SEC, was given the old brown bag cash to
They were
players
doing
on the table.
NIL. Everybody knows it.
We know it. Well, no, they weren't doing NIL. They were doing direct cash payments from the university. There was no NIL involved in anything.
Well, you call it whatever you like, but they were paying
Uh,
players.
they
Um,
were paying players, and yeah, I mean, I asset tattoo or trade for tattoos. I
your
still have a
internet
problem with that.
sucks tonight, dude.
What's that?
I said your internet sucks tonight.
Well, here, let me see if this helps. Give me a second here.
I believe that when it's all said and done, and we we look back at the Ryan Day era, I don't know that we're going to be able to apply the word dynasty to it. It might be dynasty like for Ohio State fans. I don't think we're ever going to see another Nick Saban type of run in college football. That I don't think that'll ever happen again. There's too much parity now. The playoffs creates too much
And
uncertainty for
why is
that
there parity, Eric? Because
because
everybody's paying the players
yeah,
now.
because it's all above board now. It's all above table, and so um, I don't think. But if we look back at the Ryan Day era and he's got 3 national titles, I think as an Ohio State fans, we'll call it the Ryan Day dynasty. It might not be, and of course, the Alabama fans are going to say, "No, it's not a true dynasty. Look at what Nick Saban did," but it's completely different. And I agree with the argument that you're making there, Chris. Your last thoughts, man.
You know, it's sad. Um, being a football purist, I hate to see where the game has gone, but we might as well embrace it. Gone are the days of the dynasty. Gone are the days of players who play for the love of the game instead of the money. Now that's not true in all cases, but gone are the days of the dominant head coach who ruled supreme over the game of football and ruled supreme over the field. Because now we're going to get to a point just like the NFL where the coaches become expendable at the whim of the players. Um, this is it's a new game, it's a new era, and you know I think Ryan Day has done a good job mastering this era so far. But you know what? Um, the game's different, guys. It's changed. What we have come to expect, the game we have loved for the last, in my case, nearly 50 years, it just isn't. It's not there anymore. So it was
Did
fun while it
Chris
lasted.
did Chris Wilds just give Ryan Day credit?
I did.
Did that just happen?
I did. Well, I told you, Eric. I love nothing more than the fact that he shut me up and proved me wrong. I, you know, I'm trying to end this on an upbeat note, but
You're
he's still
doing
he's
fine
still got
job, buddy.
he's still got an obstacle he's got to overcome to truly get my approval, so to speak. But you know what? He doesn't need my approval. He just went out and won a national championship. He's got the whole world approving him right now.
Like, share, subscribe. Let us know what you think about this conversation. Surely there was something Chris and I said you either agree or disagree with. Let us know in the comments section below. What a great question. Hats off to Ryan Day's beard. Phenomenal question. I told you it deserved its own video, bro. That's really interesting. Let us know. How do you define the word dynasty? Has the word dynasty, the definition of dynasty changed in your mind under this new era? Will Ohio State's Ryan Day get to that level? What will that look like? Let us know what you think in the comment section below. Let's have a great conversation about this, everybody. Till next time, be kind to one another. I owe someone's OH. Sing Carmen, Ohio with all your heart. You know what to do. OH!
IO.
Go Bucks.